is top of the hour, 7 o'clock. Let's start our meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Who's going to do the call here?
Sure. Trustee Worley.
Here.
Trustee Lannon.
Here.
Trustee Micus.
Here.
Trustee Hauk.
Here.
Supervisor Gunning.
Here.
Treasurer Rice here. Lisa Cody is excused.
All right. We've got a light load tonight. So we shoot all the way to approval of agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as it is? Do we have any additions?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as it is.
Support.
Okay. Motion support. Discussion? All right. All in favor of approving the agenda? Say aye.
Aye.
All right. That moves us over to public comment, and this first public comment is going to be restricted to 3 minutes regarding issues on this agenda and this agenda only. Anyone would like to come forward to speak in public comment? Seeing none, we close public comment and we move to reports and board comments. Let's start over on this side of the room with Norm.
Okay, a few meetings ago, I had indicated to the board that there was interest by the Saginaw Chippewa tribe in their 2% disbursement for us to consider improving our ballparks. It's something that they would like to see as a collaborative effort between us and the city of Mount Pleasant. And then serendipitously, I guess we got an email from Mark indicating that in conversation with Jim McLean, seeing about making those improvements. I'm bringing it up again tonight because mid-September will be when the next distribution comes out. So, you know, we're getting close. And I think that this would be a wonderful opportunity. The reason that the tribe is interested too is, as I know, the Little League program is looking at the World Series, or at least tournaments being played here in 2019. So if the fields were updated, that'd be great. So we could put in a request in terms of the fields. It could be all kinds of facilities, whether it's lighting, bleachers, fencing, whatever we feel is necessary. And if we could do that collaboratively with Mount Pleasant, I think there's a good chance that this would be a 2% that would be received favorably over at the tribe. So I know I've been talking to people about that, and they would like to see that happening. It's also for the tribe, brings more people to the community. For businesses, it's great. And most importantly, I think this would be a great thing for the kids to see improvement in their fields. It's for family, for quality of life, recreation. It hits all the targets that are important for us in terms of our ends. So I'd like for the board to consider that. And that's it.
Okay, well, thank you, Norm. And I guess, along with that, we could discuss maybe in final board comments, I guess, Jim, must have a conditions of the fields, what you'd like to see, what you think would be improvements, whether it be irrigation or whatever, so we can kind of broach it as we go forward, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Tim, would you like to come up next?
Yeah, sure. I'd relay some information that I gained from attending the Isabella County Board of Commissioners meeting last evening. Some of the highlights were they approved 3 fiscal year 2019 millages. The first one was for the Isabella County Commission on Aging at 0.88 of 1 mil. It has been approved. Number 2 was a fiscal year 2019 budget millage for Isabella County Parks and Recreation at a rate of 0.35% of 1 mil. And the third one that was passed was for the Isabella County Transportation Commission at 0.862 of 1 mil. And they were approved unanimously by the board, and they were excited to see that go through. Also of interest were a couple other items. One that I found quite interesting, and there was quite a bit of conversation about, and that has to do with the county child care application. That the county spends a significant amount of money, $2 million plus, and they approved the county child care application, which falls under the jurisdiction of the Isabella County Court Family Division, and it assures that child safety, well-being, permanency, and rehabilitation for a very vulnerable population is taken care of. And they indicated how, it's fortunately not a large number of children that fall under this group, but it is a expensive endeavor that the county is required to undertake, as I understood it. And also they indicated that they are closing out the multi-phase project on the Coldwater Lake Parks Playscape project, and that was approved to close out the grant funding and close the book on that as the project's complete. And that's all I have at the moment.
Very good. Thank you, Tim.
You're welcome.
Phil?
Yeah, Ben. I attended the Sidewalk and Pathways Prioritization Committee meeting on July 30th. And we reviewed existing waivers or conditions of relief, existing waivers out there, and discussed consideration for calling them in. And the committee made, approved by consensus, a recommendation to send to this board that those waivers that defined when the township would decide it necessary to call them in. You might remember there's a handful of those waivers such as that, and any other conditions that would be reasonable at this point in time, and that those properties exist within the area of that we specified most recently. You know, we as a board approved the recommendation of the sidewalk committee regarding certain roads and areas surrounding the township that would be in this specific area. I'm drawing a blank on what it's called, but I see by the nod of your head you know what I'm talking about. But what's important is you don't see it in front of us right today, because it was the wish and will of the committee to, out of courtesy, run this recommendation past the planning commission first, not for them to approve, deny, or reject. Of course, that's not their purview, but just out of courtesy to keep them in the loop. And then it'll be coming to this board as our ordinance outlines. The committee is going to meet on August 13th again, and if all goes well, we'll also meet on the 27th. In addition to the waiver issue, we'll be discussing sidewalk implementation study and comparing sidewalks and pathways, in particular how they are in our non-motorized transportation plan. And that concludes my report.
So you're staying within the areas that weren't granted, that won't be in the future granted relief, which is inside of
boundary.
Lincoln, Broomfield, Pickard, Isabella. So those are the ones essentially that where there exists a existing waiver where the language said as the township, you know,
Deems
Deemed
necessary.
necessary, then those are initially the first. So anything outside of that is still going to be allowed the relief at this point in time as far as the priorities.
Yes, at this
Okay.
point in time, but it's not gonna be, it won't be removed from the focus of the committee,
Gotcha.
just at this point in time.
Those are the ones, okay, gotcha. Okay, good, good. That's, we look at where we were at a year ago, you know, we've gone a long ways, right?
This township has gone a long way into moving forward to be a more walkable, bikeable community.
Mhm.
Absolutely right.
Yep, yep. Bill?
I didn't make it to the last road commission meeting. That was the same night as the 4-H sale out at the fairgrounds, and I buy for myself and 3 other businesses. But Tony came out there that night. Tony said that all of our contracts were approved for the East DDA. Something else that's coming up, and they're working on it this week, over on Baseline Road at the railroad tracks, there's a stop sign that's getting taken out, and we're getting like 2 new arms that come down when a train comes along, so there will be no stop sign there anymore. So that's pretty cool to see that happening.
That's all the way down almost to Mission, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there's been some fatalities
Yeah, there's
there, haven't there?
yeah. One lady here a couple years ago ran into that Santa train. There were 3 people killed there.
Yeah, and there's not a clear line of sight
No.
as you're approaching the
No, there
rail
isn't.
crossing.
No.
The
Lot of
curvature of
trees.
the road and other general terrain, limits your viewpoint
Yeah.
if you're doing 50 miles an hour.
It's gonna be just like on River Road. River, where the tracks come across.
Now, who,
There's a gate there.
who initiated that?
I have no idea.
Okay,
I just was told they were gonna do it.
okay,
This was 2 or 3 months ago.
okay.
Who initiated?
Oh, we're just talking about the River Road crossing that you mentioned, that's all.
Oh.
Sorry to.
Oh, no, that's good. I just thought maybe Tim knew who. But maybe, I don't know who initiated it, but it's a good idea.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
So,
Excellent, thank you, Bill.
Yep.
Yeah,
I just wanted to say thank you for all the people involved with the elections yesterday. You know, it is a long process, and we had a lot of people working, and those that came out to vote. So, and then the other thing was just a reminder. I'm getting at the end of my due date, so if I up and leave, I apologize. But
we
yeah.
got a fireman here anyway, so we're good.
Yeah. Yeah. No, please
You've
no.
done that before, right?
We're always set to
So-
deliver.
But you know, it's within the last couple months here, so
everything went good with the elections? I know there were a couple
Yeah,
little
it's-
things that Lisa said
Yeah.
that went wrong.
there were a couple.
But
little
that
things,
happens
but
everywhere.
Yeah, that's you can prepare for elections all you want, but
Right,
something's always, you know, there's always something new to learn.
Right.
So
Yeah, the newness of the system, I think, was,
Mhm.
but it was pretty slick. They showed me the whole soiled vote thing, how if you put a ballot in
Mm-hmm.
and you do it incorrectly, that it kicks it right back out again.
yep.
Unfortunately, that's what triggered a problem over here at Precinct 3, where they were down for a little while because of the figuring out how to handle that,
Yeah.
but they got it figured out, so. All right, thank you, Kim.
Yep.
All right, DDA, we had a special meeting of the DDA. We did get contingent contracts on our road projects. So our projects will get done this year, you know, based upon the fact if there's an opening or a day that they can do it. So the contracts that we signed are for this year only. If they don't get done, then they have to be, you know, redone next year as far as contracts are concerned. It did cost us a little bit more, but hopefully we can make that up maybe on the park bench and waste receptacle program. But that was excellent that we were able to get that accomplished. I think the residents over, towards Mayor McGuire back in those streets will really appreciate, hopefully by wintertime maybe, that they've got some brand new roads, because they're pretty miserable if you drive back there. So hopefully that happens. I think that's really about it. Again, like Kim said, kudos to the people who work the elections, and thank you to the residents of the township for, I don't know what the numbers came out like, but from I understand it was a very high turnout. I know the state of Michigan itself was, I believe, a record turnout for a midterm election. So, excellent. All right, so anything else?
I want to say, when I looked, the Isabella County was at like 30-something% of the voters came out to vote.
And that was substantially higher than normal, isn't it? Yeah.
For a primary, yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot going on.
Usually it's
this
like
time. There was a lot at
15%, I
stake.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
All right. So the cool thing is we've reduced the amount of campaign signs that we have to look at for the next couple of months. All right, so let's move away from reports and board comments, and we move to consent agenda. So we do need to have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second it.
And we had somebody look at the payables.
Yeah, I look things over. Maybe I get a little too picky here. Going through receipts, I look at things and I see, why don't we have purchase orders? I mean, I see where people are out spending $1,900, and I look at a receipt and there's no purchase order. What's it for? One particular person made 3 trips to Home Depot for the same item 3 times, 2 separate days. Many trips back and forth to Gilroy's, to Menards, to Home Depot for fittings, the same fittings all the time, the same bolts all the time. It seems to me like we'd have boxes of them in the shop where take 10 out, put them in your truck, instead of running to Menards or Home Depot all the time. I just am shocked that there's no purchase orders. I mean, I was on the County Parks and Rec Board, and I think there, when I was on that, anything over $300 they had to have a PO for. But that was quite a few years ago. I'm sure they still have that, going there, but I don't know. I just get amazed when I look at those receipts. You get sick of looking at them, and like I said, 1.25 fittings, inch fittings. Buy 5. Why not buy a box of them and have them at the shop? Throw them in your truck. Just seems to me like a lot of wasted trips.
Yeah,
Go buy 2 cans of WD-40, and then you look at another receipt, somebody else went and bought a can of WD-40. What's wrong with buying a box of it, having it at the shop? The box gets down to 2, buy another box. I just am amazed. Maybe it's because I run a private business, but if our employees go buy a gallon of paint, they better tell me what job it goes to so I know how to bill it out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sometimes from a private business, you can look at some of these things and you look at the amount of man hours maybe they're wasted getting into the car, driving to the store, getting out of the store, going into the store, going through the checkout. I mean, where that could have been, you already have the part, and if it's something that's a constant use item, yeah, why aren't there multiples on the trucks? I guess we have the right person here to ask, but.
Well, I know there's, places here in town.
Ben, pardon me.
Oh, go ahead.
I like the words you just said. We do have the right person here to ask, and although, as I say that, I'm kind of like inviting us to get down into the weeds here.
Okay, I know I'm micromanaging, but it's.
Well, what I think you are asking for is when you're taking on the responsibility to look at the receipts, you want to make sure that there's been an adequate checks and balances oversight to make sure that there is a purchase order why it was purchased and costs, etc. So sometimes we're just looking at the billing itself and not seeing the total picture. So I understand what you're talking that way.
Right, so Ben, could we hear from Mark?
Yeah.
Yep. Another question?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment on this now or during the comment. Whichever you prefer.
Oh, it's a light load. You folks we're on the topic. I might as well.
Yeah.
Whatever you guys think, I don't care.
Yeah, in terms of purchase orders, there's a BS&A purchase order module that exists that the township actually bought shortly before I got here. And I think my predecessor, the interim manager, was starting the process of implementing that. And then I came on and it got put to the back burner.
Sure.
We do have the module. It is in the work plan to implement it and put it into use. We just implemented, not directly related, but another BS&A module that had to do with tracking fixed assets. And what the purchase order module will do will be to allow for a couple things. One, the management or handling of what I'll call blanket purchase orders, say to a Gilroy's. And then two, and what the purchase order is it's a module that fundamentally creates a requisition, which is a request to purchase that somebody may create. And then there's an approval process that turns that requisition request into a authorization to purchase. And when that's done, then you have a purchase order. And so that will be helpful to the organization from a number of perspectives. The other thing I think you brought up was basically inventory. We do inventory some of our parts and frequently used items.
Yeah, you can't inventory everything. I
You can't
understand
inventory
that.
everything, so all I can tell you is that we do some inventory. Maybe we can look at and see what, if we have space and all add to inventory additional parts or materials or whatnot. You know, everything from bolts on the public works side to paper in this building, you know, on the copier side. And then, you know, yes, you're looking at invoices. Whether we have a purchase order system or not, the board is required to approve the checks by law, and we provide the supporting documentation in that review, which even if we have a purchase order and we have a copy of that attached, and I don't know if we will, to the check, we will also have the supporting documentation, which is the invoice, in that paperwork. And internally, somebody may go to Gilroy's, buy something, and either MasterCard receipt will come back or the cash purchase receipt. That goes through a payment approval process internally. A department head will review that invoice, code it for the account, look at the budget, make sure there's money available, authorize the payment, and then that gets sent to finance where they enter it into the check cutting process. And the purchase order will help help with that process and making it more, I think, efficient, for one. And it'll help with budget management because, for instance, there may be at the beginning of the year, we know we're going to buy a truck, and we have it budgeted in the vehicle line item. We can create that purchase order possibly at the beginning of the year and encumber the funds. The purchase order module allows for the encumbrance of funds so that even if you haven't bought the thing yet, you've encumbered the money, and it helps you recognize that you don't have as much budget available as you might think, even though we haven't cut checks, we've encumbered the funds. a little bit of background.
Well, it's something that I don't understand, and I've been talking to a few businesses. Somebody that works in the water department, just say, they need 5 bolts, they run down to Gilroy's, they whip out their credit card. Somebody else runs down, they need 10 bolts, they whip out their credit card. Why don't we have an account where, instead of everybody having a credit card, I just don't understand why we don't have it where they go in, a builder goes into Mission Lumber or DeWitt Lumber, they have employees go in, they get billed monthly. Why do we whip a credit card out every time we need a can of WD-40 or a bolt?
With the purchase order system, once a purchase order is created and approved, that will facilitate what you're talking
Good.
about.
Okay, good, thank you.
You can take a purchase order to a Gilroy's, and it does a couple things. It tells the vendor, you have been authorized, vendor, to provide us essentially credit on, say, $5,000 a blanket PO
Yeah.
of miscellaneous parts. And if we as the customer end up spending $5,100,
Right,
I have an argument to make with the vendor that I'm not sure I owe you the $100 because you didn't have authorization to
go
provide
over the
that.
5,000.
Right.
Right.
And in other places I've worked, I've had to send reminder letters to vendors that, you know, you only had authorization on $10,000 worth of stuff.
Right.
You've sold 12,000, and I'm not going to pay you the other 2, even though we have the material, because you didn't have authorization to sell it to us.
Well, I know
It
that-
helps both parties.
Yeah, you have credit limits. I mean, I know in
Yeah.
mainly the 3 places that I purchase stuff, I have credit limits, and I always try to keep a running total in my head. And just say if all the bills are due on the 20th of the month, well, on the 15th of the month, if I know that I'm at 95% of what I owe by the 20th, then I'll go in and I'll pay some money. I know we can't really do that, but I just don't
So
understand.
anyways, hopefully that's
Yeah, no, it
responsive
clears
to
up a
your
lot of
questions.
things for me, thank you. Other than that, I have nothing else.
Well, Bill, thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your
Yeah,
oversight, Bill.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay.
Yep, that was, you know, that was a question that we, I think, have all had a little bit at some point in time, was the lack of purchase orders, right?
There's a possibility that that module could be implemented yet this year, but I think it's more likely to be 19 because there's some other things that I think have actually higher priority. But
Okay, thank you.
it's on the horizon.
All right.
Thanks, Mark.
I just mentioned to follow up on that though, you know, not knowing, you know, in detail how the township does it. I gotta believe the department heads consider how they procure material. It's not necessarily just a simple thing. When you carry inventory, you gotta think of the carrying cost of things, you gotta think about the space that it
Right.
requires, the inventory that's required. Potentially various products need to be kept in certain safety type cabinets. Safety data sheets need to be managed and trained on. There's a lot of different things that go into determining if you're going to make spot purchases or have something on a blanket or
Yeah,
pass up.
but it just seems.
But I don't have the details on how we
Yeah.
do it, and I think it's a good point to make sure that as a township we review our purchasing processes. And I do recall that the interim manager that was here before Mark was high on getting that purchasing module purchased and implemented.
Yep.
But Mark had his priorities, and I'm sure.
And that's
he
one
says
of
it's
them,
coming
but,
up.
yeah.
Well, I mean, I look at things like a couple of things a couple businesses I've talked to. I've talked to the McLaren here in Mount Pleasant. I know people there. There's 2 credit cards for that whole hospital. So there's what amazes me. There's 2 there, and I can count how many we have here from somebody going down and buying a $5 part and whipping a credit card out. I mean, I just think that's ridiculous.
I think
Personal opinion, but,
Well, I tell you,
and I know it's, like you said, it's being worked on.
yeah, those small purchases too are the processing fees, and those are coming from somebody that deals with having to pay those stupid credit card service fees every month. I think the businesses would be very happy to have a purchase order system set up, because they probably are, those little $5, $3, $10 items, the processing charges are actually quite high. So, all right, so we did have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we do take this to vote. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, agenda approved. Get back to my front page here. So this would take us to new business, and the first item would be, an only item, is item A. And this would be to consider the approval of the job description for the position of Public Services Department Director. Mark, would you like to lead us into this?
Thank you. This is on, this information starts on page 14 of your agenda packet. When we approved the 2018 budget, we approved some new positions for the organization, 2 in the general fund and 2 in the split between the, I believe, the water and the sewer funds. One of them was described as the Public Services Department Director position, and that is the item in front of you tonight. At the time that we adopted the budget, the position description was not fully defined. It was talked about conceptually, and you all approved the position, but the job description itself had not yet been approved. There are in the 2004 personnel policy administration policy document, there's reference made to the board needing to approve job descriptions. So even though the board had approved the position in the budget process, I felt the job description ought to come. And ideally that would have been done at the time of the review of the position at the time of budgeting. The complexity of the organization has changed over the years, along with the breadth and depth of the types of service delivery and the requirements that we have on those provision of services, both from a regulatory point of view and citizen expectation point of view, and to adequately meet the this changing environment. The organization needs some additional what I call senior management, and this is one of those positions. This position will improve the organizational policy development, implementation, accountability, and I think it will add to and help with making the organization operate more efficiently. This position is part of a larger movement that I've talked about already, the other positions that have been approved. And to give you some context on that larger picture in your agenda packet is what I refer to as a functional organizational chart. So you can see it's almost like a department organizational chart. It is not a reporting organizational chart, but you can look at that and see that in my mind and the way this organization is going to kind of develop and evolve, the finance department and those functions that are listed under there, led by a finance director, a community and economic development department, and those various functions that would be under the purview of a community and economic development department director, which is also a position that was approved at the budget process. A department that I'm now calling Public Services Department, and that's this job description. That department director job description is what's in front of you there, and you can see those functions outlined in that functional organizational chart. And I might be missing a couple, but there's IT and legal and those kind of things.
Risk management, yeah.
So it's part of a larger effort. This particular position, the functional responsibilities include the management of the water and the wastewater utility, the facilities that exist within the organization, Township Hall, Jamison, McDonald, Park, Jameson Park, all the facilities, broadly speaking. Fleet, we have a lot of rolling stock, so management of the fleet. Parks maintenance, which is a time-consuming and a fairly large function. The management of the roads, to the extent that, acknowledging we don't own the roads, but a position that will have responsibility for keeping a closer eye on that and interacting with the road commission as it pertains to the roads, and interacting with EDAs and those kind of things. And then other, what I might call traditional public service functions. All that existing under this position. The job description itself is included in your packet, so there's some other items that may not have mentioned here at the dais tonight. In terms of the knowledge and experience and skills that are part of the job description that you're looking at, includes the provision for a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, business management, public administration, or some closely related field, 7 or more years of progressively more responsible experience in the public services arena, utility administration experience with budgeting, supervision, project management, and again, there's more detail in the agenda item paperwork. When the FY18 budget was adopted, funding was provided, approved for 6 months of this position. We kind of figured we'd be getting around to this mid-year. And so there's 6 months of funding for the position, salary, benefits. That is approximately $63,000 annually, which you will see in the FY19 budget, salary and benefits totaling about $126,000. These costs will be cost-centered in probably 3 funds, maybe 2, possibly 3, water fund, sewer fund, general fund. Some of this activity affects the general fund. And then at the same time, and as part of the budget approval process, there's a current position on the books called, I believe it's account coordinator within the utility department. And that position is going to be reviewed, reclassified. We anticipate that the expenses related to that position will be lower than what currently exists. So if you look at the cost of the new position, net of the cost savings of the reclassified position, the net impact is an increase in, that's part of the EdKey budget from a 6-month point of view, of about $35,000 increase, and annually $71,600. So that is this, the background on this request, and be happy to answer any questions you may have on it.
I know this is all bundled into one, 126,000 for next year. What is the salary range? And then, obviously, you know, I mean, I know I just looked up this evening. The city of Mount Pleasant is looking at an assistant public service director, and the salary range on that was the upper 70s to the low 80s. And it's basically the same responsibilities, not quite as many responsibilities as this position. And then it said, then the benefit package, and then it said go to benefit package, and there were like 9 paid holidays and, you know, all the typical benefits that public service workers have. It talked about that.
And so, a couple things related to that. There is not a published or an approved salary range for this position yet because it's new. We are in the process of putting out for bid a, what are we calling it, wage study.
Yeah, you were, that's right.
This position will be part of that.
Okay.
I would anticipate that, I mean, this is a department level director position. It'll be paid, the range will be lower than the range for the township manager, but it'll be, the range, I don't know, I'm just guessing, but, might be $70,000 to $90,000 or something
Okay.
like that, for just the salary component.
Yeah.
And then the benefits are, everything from the healthcare expense that the organization pays, FICA,
Right.
Medicare, all of that stuff. So that's where the 126 comes from.
Gotcha.
Sure. Yeah.
And what's then being reassessed is the Public Works Coordinator. The current position is the one that's going to be reevaluated. And consequently, what you're doing, you're going to be saving about $35,000 by relabeling or reclassifying that
That's
position.
the estimates that I
in that
used in the
ballpark.
budget.
Okay.
We have not gone through the process of what exactly do we want this position to be, do. We know we need the position. We know it will have considerably less responsibility than it currently has. And I think the number you threw out there is about right. The new reclassified, quote unquote, would be in a range where $50,000 a year might be in that range.
Okay.
So Mark, under the Public Service Department, would you see that having additional title changes that you'd be looking at as you if you were to put positions under that?
Within the department?
Yes. If you're changing the coordinator position to a director, is that gonna?
Well, what we're doing is creating a new director position, okay? We have a position in the organization called accounts coordinator. We're going to reevaluate that. I don't know what it's going to be called. I don't exactly know what duties it will have. The other positions within the department all have titles right now, everything ranging from water operators to laborers. What exactly happens within that department, I don't know. That'll largely be left up to recommendations made by the department director.
Is it feasible to make the move you're suggesting without addition of personnel at this point in time?
No. And in fact, the board's already approved a budget with these positions, so in my mind, we've already asked and answered that question.
Do you foresee it transpiring this year?
The other positions,
The director position, finding a, selecting a candidate?
I do. And I also plan on this year having in front of you the community development director job description, and hopefully having that filled by, before the end of the year. As, you know, within the budget that's been approved.
Thanks.
Bennett, might I ask a question?
Mm-hmm.
Mark, what kind of, how would you describe the, how would you describe the review of this job description? The review that was beyond, outside your office?
The job description in front of you,
Yes.
like the process that was gone in to create it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
I developed the original draft. I did that myself, and sources of information were knowledge and experience that I possess. A review of probably 6 other job descriptions that kind of fell into this thought that I obtained from, you know, essentially the web, from other organizations. I didn't look at the one from Mount Pleasant. I don't know why, but so I put together a draft, and then I had it reviewed by Ms. Smith. We had discussion about it. She, you know, is doing, as a practical matter, a lot of this work. Some of this work, although being done, is not part of the accounts coordinator job description. So you know, that was a second set of eyes, and then I might have made a few more as, but it did not receive, the job description did not receive any outside review.
I guess my question is I'm trying to figure out when this person is going to be able to sleep, because there's an awful lot of responsibilities here. I suppose they're going to be delegated responsibilities to an underling. I would have to think some of this stuff. I don't see how conceivably one person's going to do all this.
There's a recognition by me, and it pertains to all the department director positions, that folks are going to need to become comfortable with delegation, and I'm big on delegation. You know, I don't shy from it, but it's the only way you can get things done. And you know, sometimes folks are hesitant to delegate because it's a risk somebody's taking to delegate, and you know, all that. But yeah, you're right. Whether it's a finance director position or a public services department director position, you know, these various functions and all the tasks that are part of it, you know, that's why you have other people in the department.
And you're going to be able to also delegate it down.
You need to be
too.
delegated and hold people accountable and have expectations and all that.
And ultimately, you can always delegate if you have good staff. That's what it boils down to. So you're comfortable with your staff and you trust that they're going to do the work, you can delegate it more easily. So
And if you don't have that stuff, then you need to get different staff.
exactly. Yeah.
So I hope that's responsive.
Yep.
So what are we asking for tonight? You're asking to approve this job description? Is that what the motion is?
Asking for approval of the job description as it's presented in front of you.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that we approve the job description for the position of Public Services Department Director of Union Township as described in the material that we have.
I'll second that.
Okay, we do have a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion?
I do. I have a follow-up question, if I might ask
Yes.
Mark. Where does the, I'm making an assumption when I look at this job description and the functional management chart that issues of safety, safety management, and safety training would also fall under the Public Service Department Director.
I think it says it in there.
It's got
Did
it
I
in
skip
here.
over
Yeah.
that part?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got it in.
Yeah.
That's referenced in the job description. It could have been, and maybe should have been, referenced in the functional org chart. That particular department is, has the most involved in the formality of a safety program.
Yeah.
Mhm.
You know, and, yep.
Safety in the facilities in this office building, et cetera,
Maybe all the OSHA
Right.
stuff. and stuff.
Yes.
while we're driving down the road.
Mhm.
And then as a, it actually ends up being more broad than, often a safety function will exist in an HR department. And, they're making sure that all these other departments are doing what they need to do to comply with safety. Everything from, going down into restricted space to making sure they're teaching workers not to leave file cabinet drawers open. It's all part of risk management.
Very good, thanks for that answer.
I thought it was very detailed in terms of the job description itself, the requirements for the position. I think it lays out the expectations for an individual accepting this position, sets up criteria for what they'd be required to do, and it's objectifiable in terms of evaluation at a later date. So I like what you came up with here. I thought it was very thorough. So.
All right, any further discussion?
Yeah, if I could, Ben.
Yes, sir.
Not specific to this position, but more along the functional chart, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
Can you foresee at this point in time a need for a sixth box that you would add with how our organization operates at this point, if,
Like another department?
yeah, if you, do you currently see a need or could conceive of the possibility without any drastic change to our operation of a sixth department that in your mind could or should be considered?
None that come to mind. I think,
Marketing,
I
market our product.
I see a need for additional functionality, ability to have the ability or the requirement to have other functions that we're focused on. But I see those likely falling into an existing department. A sixth box, if we brought legal in-house, that would end up in its own box. If we opened up our own cop shop, that would
Public safety.
create its own box. I don't foresee either of those happening. Of course, we still have a need for that function, and
I guess that.
I probably could have listed some other departments like public safety under risk management,
Mhm.
and that's provided by,
I see that under
Contracts.
contracts is how you have that laid out.
yeah,
currently.
right. But
Public
these are the
relations.
primary departments that I see. Are you, I mean, if you're thinking of one that we might
I'm
be
not,
looking at.
no, I really don't, but now that, we've talked about, and maybe it's in here, we've often mentioned in the course of, even prior to you, human resources would be something that would come up.
And HR.
Well, that's a good point. That would be a the next thing this organization would need, once it got to a certain size, certain mass, would be an HR department. And it may only have 1 or 2 people in it, but that function, you know, is spread across the organization right now. It's not the best way to do it, but we, you know, do we need a department for HR for 25 employees? Probably not yet, but because of that, employee benefits administration, that's in the finance area because it's costs a lot of money. But it's mostly managed from a financial perspective, not an employee perspective. If it was in an HR department, both of those things would be being dealt with. And you know, a traditional HR department will help create a performance evaluation system for the organization. Right now, you know, I'm getting around to creating one, but it takes a while because we don't have, you know, another person to help do it. But yeah, the HR would be the next logical one, now that you mention it. And I've thought about that before. The HR department is the balances the needs and requirements of both management and the employees. You know, they're looking out for the interests of both, and it's an important function.
Thank you.
I mean, you could go into many public relations, you know, if you ever needed that.
All right. Anybody else want to chime in? We're good?
Yeah, you know, I had questions about the job description process, development process, and a couple of other questions. As far as this debate, discussion portion of the motion, I found that the job description really covers the basis for what we've approved in the budget. And I think what vision we've had as we've had various conversations about where we want to see the township go and how we want to see it grow. So I'd be voting in favor of this.
All right. Going once, going twice. All set?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so we do have a motion and a second for approval, and this would be the approval of the job description for the position of Public Services Department Director. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion does carry. That is the last of our new business items. We're on record pace here. I think I should probably slow everything down a little bit. So we move to item 11, which is extended public comment. This is going to be 5 minutes, and this is anything that anybody here in the crowd wants to chime in on. So we do open public comment at this time.
I've got some questions for the board.
If you'd like to come up, Mr. McDonald, and sit down. If you could just state your name and address.
I'm Bob McDonald. I live at 930 South Whiteville Road. I grew up down the road here on the farm in the middle of Lincoln and Baseline. Our family was very involved in the running of Union Township. My dad was a clerk for 30-some years. The park is named after him, which I'm very proud of. And but my problem now is I have a house down here on Pickard Road that was on the farm, and I bought it from my dad and built on to it before I got married and lived in it for a few years. And we moved to town on account of a birth defect of one of our children, so we could be close to the school. And so I've rented it out ever since to try to keep it in the, in the family and that. And I've had a renter, the last renter, left, I don't know when, but I went there in the 1st of March. And I went in and everything was empty and everything was gone. And there's a bill on the door for a water bill, overdue water bill, of $200.09. So I thought, well, you know, I'll have to pay that, I'm sure of that, because it goes back to the property owner if the renter doesn't pay it. But I went down in the basement and I shut my valve off, so there would be no more water used after that time. And I come in to pay the bill just this last month, and it went from $200.09 to $748.17. Now the meter, there's a number of meter readings here that are all the same, and yet I was charged for gas or for water usage, and I was charged interest on the bills that kept going up. And I think that's very unfair, and I'd like the board to limit this to the amount that I should legally pay. I got a letter from the manager, and he says his decision was final, and if I wanted to go any farther, he reduced it from $748 to $605. He said that was the final decision, and if I wanted to go any further, I'd have to come before the board. So here I am. I'd like to see if I can convince the board that I do not owe all that money. I talked to Ben over it, and I talked to Bill over it. So
Mr. McDonald, have you come into the office and spoken in person to
I
the
came
manager?
in to pay the bill, and that's when they told me, and they gave me this sheet of all the times that the meters were read and everything. And from that time on, it went to $347. I think I do own that, because the meter reading went up 1,000 gallons. But from there on, the meter readings were all the same, so no water was being used. I got shut-off notices that I've been charged 4 times, and the water was never shut off until just at the end of last month. So why wasn't the water shut off after the first water shut-off notice? And so, if I understand right, if the township shuts it off, then you are not charged for anything on it. That may be interest on the bill if it's not paid right away, but that's my understanding, so.
So you haven't been into the office to talk to the township manager?
I've been in and I talked to the assistant. She brought me out this paper.
Right.
And I asked her then, I says, well, show me where, you know, your ordinance or whatever, where you have to, where I have to pay for water that I did not use.
Right.
And she says, well, that's what we have to do, that's in the ordinance. And I says, well. So then I come back in later and tried to talk to, was it Kim? And she was not here anytime I come in. I didn't set up an appointment, but then I went through communication on email. So that has been our last. It's through the email, and I think I sent everybody in the board member a copy of the emails that I sent to the office.
Bob, when you got the initial bill for the $200 or so.
I never got it.
You said there was something on the door, though.
It was hanging on the door.
Okay, and then
But the you know, the water was in the renter's name, it was not in my
Gotcha,
name.
I understand.
So I was never notified.
Right.
So, you know, if I wouldn't have went to the door and got that, I still wouldn't be.
Yeah. When you turned off the water yourself to keep it from going into so that it wouldn't be used anymore, at what point did you let the township know that this renter had basically built and left, and here you are stuck with the bill?
I did, I thought, you know, it's not my bill, the township, if she doesn't pay the bill that was, you know, at the time that she left or didn't pay,
Right.
well then, you know, I'd have to pay that.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't, I thought, well, I'm selling the house, I'm getting tired of renting, so.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to get rid of it.
It's an incentive to sell.
And
but-
so I didn't, really worry about it too much. I thought I would sell it
Yeah.
before I rented it again, so
Yeah.
the
I'm just trying,
water's been turned off ever since.
just so I understand, because I hear the dilemma, but when actually, from when you turned off the water, so there wouldn't be any further use, the township hadn't turned off because they hadn't come in yet.
Well, they had the notice, but they never shut it off.
Right,
Now,
but-
why, I don't know.
Did you ever notify someone along the way that you had shut that water off, so it hadn't been used, so the meter hadn't changed?
No, but the meter readings show it, that there was no water
Mm-hmm.
ever used.
Okay.
So, to my knowledge, that means it's been shut
Okay.
off.
Yeah, so at what point
Or
did
no,
this,
you know.
at what point then, so this goes back to the 1st of March, when you noticed that there was the bill there and the water's gonna be turned off, you knew that the renter had bilked you, you turned off the water, so that's March
Yeah,
1st.
so I thought at that time, well then, I'll go in and pay it, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't rush right into it.
Right, so at what point then, so this is March 1st, when did you actually then come in to present this information to pay the bill to the township? When was your first visit here?
The last end of July.
End of July. So from between March 1st, then April, May, June, July, those months, it had been turned off, but they didn't know it here. They didn't know anything until you came in to pay the bill on the end of July, is that correct?
They didn't know it, but they read the meter that said that
Sure.
it was not being used.
Yeah, I got
So
you.
what, to me, what,
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to understand, in terms of communication, was there a delayed response? Was there something what could have been done sooner? I'm just trying to understand where it broke down,
well, I don't know about that. But, like I said, I was probably lax and not coming in quicker,
Mhm.
but like I said, I was trying to sell a house.
Gotcha.
And I thought, well, I don't need the water,
Mhm.
so, there's no big worry about it.
So you just assume because you turn off the water, meter's not going, so everything's just gonna
There
be,
wouldn't be any more
Okay.
charges, other than, I guess they can charge it interest, and I think the manager said that there's approximately a 44 quarterly billing, even if the water's turned off.
Mhm.
Now, I don't know what that's for.
right. I really appreciate the email that you sent to all the board, myself included, on that stream. That helped us understand the problem. Also saw the response that Ms. Smith had then sent to you, indicating that, there was gonna be a credit, and I think that's where you went from the 748 to the 605.
Yeah, she went to $613.
Okay, yeah, I figure here,
The manager on his last one came down with the 605.
okay, yeah, because I figured it was took off 134.45 for the credit, brought you down to 614, and then,
He took off.
Mr. Stroger, he took off an additional, so it brought down to 605, okay. So, did anyone explain to you the ordinance as to why this is the way, I'm just trying to understand, like, what was explained to you as to?
I asked her, I said, can you show me the orders? I asked the assistant to Kim, whatever,
Angela, uh-huh.
I asked her, I said, can you show me where you could be charging all of this?
Mhm.
And she said, well, I'll have to talk to my supervisor, and that was the last.
Okay.
So
So-
I'll come back in later.
So what are you asking for from the board? What are you asking for tonight?
Well, I'm asking to reduce it down to the $347.99. Because there was some water used after the 200, because there's 1,000 gallons used. But then after that, the meters were all the same, the meter reading was all the same.
So what was the price? It's 340?
$347.99.
Okay. So that's what you feel would be fair to pay versus the
Yeah.
605, and that's where the
I will
discrepancy
pay that, I'm
is.
not sure that's a fair way, because there is an estimated calculated bill, there's 4 of them in here, for $147.90. After they read the meter, which were all the same, they calculated a bill at $147. And that's that went from the 209 to the 347.99, that 140 estimated
Right.
bill.
Right, well, and what makes this,
Calculated.
and what makes this worse is that it wasn't you using the water, it was a renter that
Yeah,
split.
you know,
Yeah,
and
I understand.
She paid it up, well, until she didn't pay it anymore, which made me
Right,
sad.
right. So what can we do I mean, apparently we have a sewer and water department, you know, the manager's dealing with it. What are we to be doing on this? I mean, I'm not quite sure, we as a board, what we're supposed to be doing with this. It sounds like you've made a decision, and what I think what Bob's asking for is, I guess, for more leniency in terms of, you know, what he was charged and the reasons for it. You know, is there anything we as a board can do? I mean, as, you know.
Well, if I was a board member, which I'm not,
Siri just said hi to you.
you're in extended public comment right now,
Okay, yeah, gotcha.
and I don't know, I haven't been watching the clock, but you've received a comment, and you know, you might want to respond that thank you for, you know, your information. Maybe ask the manager to meet with the individual, something along those lines.
Okay.
As a board, and even, well, we're in extended public comment right now.
Gotcha.
We could,
If you'd like,
we started going down the rabbit hole a little while ago, so I've afforded some liberties
I can
that,
continue to speak, but I'm going to defer for a moment to the
yeah. So I think this is something that, you know, we could even discuss maybe in final board comment, continued discussion on this. And then for the time being, we've got other people that want to use the podium, so I think we need to get them up and then thank Mr. McDonald for coming in.
Thanks
was
for your
my fault.
comments, Bob.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob, for coming in.
That was my fault too for extending it, but I guess I was also wanting to get some information.
Yeah, it's
to make
it's
sure
a
I
an
understood.
unusual
Yeah, it's an unusual case, I wanna
situation.
be sure.
It started with Mr. Micus, though.
Did he ask the first question? All right.
It's your fault.
I tried to end it.
But you revved me up.
We've got two other gentlemen that would like to come up, I believe. Mr. McLean's going to come up first.
Jim McLean, live at 5425 East Broadway Road, been living in the township for I don't know how long, most of my life. And I'm the president of the Union Township Kids Little League. And as many of you are aware, we have been awarded, along with Mount Pleasant Little League, the 2019 Major Baseball Little League State Tournament. This is the big one. 12-year-olds. They compete at district level. There's 16 districts in the state. They all, this tournament winner go to the state tournament. The winner of the state tournament goes to the regional in Indianapolis where they're playing right now. And in fact, Michigan is the only undefeated team down there playing for the championship on Saturday from Grosse Pointe. Second year in a row for the same league. And from there they go to the World Series. This event will take place next July 18th to the 24th. And the reason we are co-hosting with Mount Pleasant is to give us 4 fields. They have 2 quality fields, we have 2 quality fields. And with 16 teams coming in, which will be divided into 4 pools of 4 for pool play. We can play on all 4 fields, only have to have 2 games a day, which is a tremendous advantage for your volunteers, don't have to be out there all day long. Normally a league will have all 16 teams come in, play on 2 fields, and you're playing 4 games a day on those fields, and you're running from 10 in the morning to 6 at night. And that's a stressful situation if you've ever been at one of these tournaments. But with the cooperation of Mount our two main diamonds are Saco, which has the lights, and Sullivan, which is right in the middle of the park. Both of them are very quality fields. If you just go out there and look at them, you'll know. And we believe that our kids are getting better and better because of the quality of fields they have here and they're able to play on. Over the years, our league has put tens of thousands of dollars into these fields to upgrade them, and worked alongside the township with pretty good cooperation on trying to get some things done. Right now, we're in the process of redoing the fence on Saco. If you've noticed, all the wood's gone. And from the dugouts down to the outfield fence is being replaced with 4-foot chain link instead of the wood now. It'll be green vinyl. But we are gonna maintain the wood in the outfield to give it a more stadium-like atmosphere. Kids really like that. And it's cool to play on when you're out there and you hear the ball hit off the wood. And we have the green monster in the middle. It's 8 foot tall. And, it's fun. McDonald Park has been a focal point of many, many tournaments. People from all over the state come here to play, and they enjoy it. They enjoy this park. The facilities are good. It's open. We got 6 fields out here that are played on. If you come out on any given night in the month of June, you'll see all 6 fields going, and it gets a little hairy. But Kim always gets concerned with traffic. But we work it out. It's fun to watch. And then we've got tournaments we're hosting in June and July, not only baseball but softball. It's well used. There's room for improvement, I think, on the west side. I believe that there can be extra parking put over there. It's pretty much the west side is no man's land. There's nothing going on over there, west of the softball fields. An additional parking lot with a small pavilion would be great. The wooded area could be cleaned out, made into a picnic area. I think it'd be fabulous. The walking trail could be continued all through there from the Commission on Aging. I think they would enjoy that. We just got done cutting out the warning tracks on both fields to widen those out, make them nicer, more safety for the kids. Once the outfielders hit that first step, they know they're getting close to the wall. It used to be only about that wide. Now it's about 10 foot wide, so they know when they hit that first step that they're getting close to the wall, they can slow down and not run into it. The wood wall, they only run into once and they remember it. We've submitted a to help with some drainage that we've had some issues with. Sullivan Field has an existing drain that's broke. It's not working very well. We want to upgrade that. We want to put an additional one on Saco Field and left field to help out with that drainage. We want a PA system on both fields that we're looking at. Got a local contractor that'll put that in for us, which would be a total cost of about $5,000 on that for both, total for both fields. And then I wanted to relocate our flag area to a central location, and I'm yet to get with Mark about and Kim about that. But not only one tall pole, but several to go around it to display all our district banners. We've won a lot of districts, and we have nowhere to show those flags. We want to do that.
Hey, Jim,
That's a few of the.
I gotta have you wrap it up because you're about 3 minutes past. Okay. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your visit.
Yeah, thank you. Nice wish list.
Cooperation with Parks personnel this summer has been fantastic. Having 3 people out there was perfect.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks for all you do, Jim.
Jim number 2. There we go.
I'm gonna make this brief. Jim Horton, 3089 Hunters Trail, Mount Pleasant here, District 4 County Commissioner. I'm gonna just digress for a moment, talk about the baseball fields. I had 2 children going through the Union Township and the baseball field, well, I shouldn't say baseball, the ball fields. I had a daughter who played softball, so I can't say she told me baseball. And Jim, my son's running into the walls more times than once, so playing baseball, so I was.
Slow learner.
I don't know if he's learning or not, he just doesn't have it. But anyway, it's a gem for this community, this township. It's, and Union Township is very, very competitive in baseball. Anybody that's had a child go through the softball or the baseball knows that, so it's very impressive. Township, excuse me, the county has been, during the summer, has been fairly slow. We did not have a meeting the first Tuesday in July. That was our off day, our off time. Some of the things that we're working on, Trustee Lannon talked about at last night's meeting. One of the things we also discussed was in regards to how we're handling our defined benefit payments to our retirees. We structured a little bit because that is, as we term it, promise made, promise kept type situation. And that is nothing negative to people who are on defined benefits and retirees. They've earned that money. They worked hard for that money, and we, as a county, we have to pay that. We have to fund that. So, and it is a legacy cost, as I term it. It's expensive. It is quite an expense to the county. It's been taking away from our fund balance year in, year out since I've been on board. And we've decided as a board to kind of change the structure of how we're going to do that. Basically, we're going to extend out our payments, do a little different payment plan on that, or pay it differently. We're able to do that because we are considered to be a well-funded entity. If we were a poor funded entity, like some of the counties are in the state, that would not be allowed. So we've been allowed to do that. There's somewhat of a cost to it, and that cost is the amount of earnings that you would make on the money that you would put in. If you lower amount we put in, obviously it's not going to earn as much on the market, because they invest that and do a bunch of stuff. The people handle that. But if you look at the county expenses, that's a necessity to be done. So that just to give you an update on that. We're going to be moving forward with that. That's just part of our budget discussion. That's phase one. We talked about that. Margaret, our administrator, wanted to get the board's approval to do that before she started rolling, working more and more on the budget, and that's coming. That's probably going to be around $21 million. And I'll keep you updated as we go forward. That is part of my finance and administration committee. I'm the chairman of that, and I'm involved quite heavily in budgets. So it's kind of what I enjoy doing. And it's a tough thing. I mean, you mentioned Trustee Hout and running the business. The same thing. And it's a very difficult thing, purchases and things like that. And you really, I operate on a point of macro-management. I don't like to micro it. I think that's what Margaret McAvoy, she does an excellent job in that. I stay out of her way and let her do it. So hopefully one day we will have revenue come into our county. We had votes yesterday in the out townships, and I don't believe any of the planning commissions were created. So I don't know where the wind turbines are. I've gone on record to say that, it's going to be hard pressed to find an alternative to the amount of revenue that could possibly bring into our county. So, and I look just down at Gratiot and what they're doing as an example. And it's alternative energy, and that's not a bad thing either. So, looking at that, I think that's a win-win. So, I don't want to go too much into it. Again, we talked about millages, something coming up in our county, which we haven't really hit on too much. I'll know more about it on Monday because I'm also on the 911 board. Is that they're going to be looking at what's called the Smart 911. Tim, you probably know a little bit about that, so you may have heard. It's basically we can use your cell phones and do digital stuff. I think the county's going to join that. It's going to be quite expensive down the road. I think it's mostly the equipment that's going to cost. But I'll get more of a handle on that and I'll report back next time. So we're going to discuss that on Monday. We're having quote-unquote emergency meeting. So 911 and emergency. Those things. So let's see. We had signed earlier in July. We signed a transportation agreement with MMR to go kind of hand in hand with our with the county morgue situation going to Sparrow. Again, that's one of the services you have to have as a county morgue, jail, things like that. That's going to be coming probably down the pike in the next. I wouldn't be surprised to see Sheriff Maine start campaigning on jail pretty soon. If any of you have ever had an opportunity to tour the jail on a touring basis, I would recommend doing that. If you haven't done it, it's quite interesting to see the amount of layers of paint in the building. It's just pretty amazing. also look at some of the segregation involved as far as male-female. When you go and you see just, for lack of a better term, paper over windows, so male inmates can't stare at female inmates, or female inmates can't. You know, we're in 2018 and we're dealing with that, so it's gonna have to be addressed soon. So I think that's a county-wide effort, not just anything. I think that as a county, we have to look at that, so. That's pretty much all I've got. Again, operating as a county right now, we're kind of in a quote-unquote slow period, but with the election, I see Ms. Cody's not here tonight, so I'm sure if she put in a long meeting, it looks like there was quite a long, I would not want to handle elections, I'm sorry, that's just one of the things that I would not want to talk about. Anyway, does anybody have any questions for me? If we can,
How are things progressing out in Nottawa Township with wastewater?
They had a meeting on Monday night. I was unfortunate, again, with the work commitment. I was unfortunate to not able to attend. They had a meeting with Nottawa people that live in Beale City proper. I had at Beale City High.
Yeah.
And they also had the
Coldwater Lake. Yeah.
I think they discussed various options as far as, I don't know if they settled on it. I know they have their engineers there. And my understanding, I got one of the things down here right now. They have their engineers there, and I think they're gonna talk, I don't wanna put monies out there, but it's 15,000 to 20,000 assessment. Again, I don't wanna throw that dollar amount out there, cause it's not set in stone. I was not there, just getting secondhand knowledge on that, so. And whether they're gonna go with a lagoon system or hookup, I can't answer that either. But it is being addressed, that is the state involvement, and it's going forward, so. That's an ongoing, I think they've got another meeting scheduled too.
Well, I know that their township supervisor, Nottawa Township supervisor was, I see him quite a bit, and he was telling me a couple of things. He said that they're looking at tying in with us, or Mount Pleasant. Corey.
He's a member of was a member of the ECOLA committee, and glad you brought that up, because I did forget to mention that. There was also a report, Tim, that was not presented in the 7 o'clock meeting, that was presented in the 3 o'clock meeting. As far as the time of transfer ordinance, it looks like about 19% of the applications have failed.
Wow.
So that's what they're catching.
Perfect.
About 19. That's kind of what we figured. Actually, I heard as high as 30 initially in the first year, 30%, but about 19%. But then again, you don't know what's being done before the time of transfer too. So whether somebody knows that they got a bad system or they got a bad hookup, whether you've been discharging right into the drain or into the river, you know, before you install that, why have someone come out and inspect it and tell you that when you know you've been doing it? So I think there could be a chilling effect on that. So again, and also too, I got to commend the realtors. Who I think they've made very good comments. It was very helpful in our committee. Very helpful. And I think I don't want to say bought into it, but I think they're a good voice for it. Good voice for it, and really educating people on it. So and it's a good thing. It really truly is a good thing for our county. So anybody else? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right. So I believe, once my iPad comes back up with us, we're up to manager. Yep, there you go, manager comments. So, Mark?
Thank you. And I do have a few tonight, primarily centered on, I guess this is the Community and Economic Development Night manager comments. A little update on the Hannah's Bark Park. Had a recent board meeting. Just to report out, there's 247 members, annual members, 16 weekly memberships. That's the highest we've had since it opened. There's a lot of indication and information that indicates that the Bark Park is a really valuable amenity for the community writ large. We participate in the construction of it, the maintenance of it, the construction of the restroom, which we're participating in. That construction started this past week. The schedule is for completion in mid-October. But based on the start date, and if things go well, it could be done by the middle of September. And then related to that, the city of Mount Pleasant was recently notified that they received a $16,000 grant award to be used towards the concession and warming area that was part of the vision of the restroom, and I mentioned that when you all approved that resolution a couple meetings ago. Thought that was going to be a little further down the line. The cost of that add-on, if you will, is $20,000, so they've secured a big chunk of that funding. And once they secure the rest of it, they'll go ahead and begin that add-on. It's possible it could be done by the end of the year, but it primarily depends on the funding. The 4 more is part of just budget execution. We have ordered 4 more handicap picnic tables that will go into our parks. We added 4 or 5 last year. We're continuing to add to that. The from the kind of economic development side, thought it would be of interest that you may have heard, and maybe Jim McBride reported it out, that the Mid-Michigan Development Corp had secured funding to do a study on getting US 127 opened up in that 10-mile or so stretch south of here that would really help this region economically. So there was a study done, and the result of that study was that project, which before was not on any planning horizon for MDOT, of course they knew about it, but it was not part of any planning document, has now made it to MDOT's long-term plan. So that's an achievement. And you know, what we want to continue to work on is getting it to the 5-year plan. It'll be done in pieces and all, but you know, at least it's on a planning document at MDOT now. So, and then the Mid-Michigan Development Corp, which I'm a board member of, and the township provides financial support to that, is our economic development arm, more or less. Also received a grant for $16,000 to identify and create a best practices document that will be centered on rural site marketing toolbox, and you know, the needs of the rural community in terms of site identification and promotion to the site selectors is different than an urban. So this toolbox will be used for all of this region. We're part of Region 5 from a Michigan economic development perspective. It's kind of the midsection of the state. So it would be used by all parties, entities within that region, which speaks to the work that the MMDC can do if others are going to be using it. The CMU Research Corporation, which is located in the Smart Zone over on Denison, it received a grant to create marketing and an awareness tools and programs to make sure entrepreneurs know that facility, that opportunity exists. My sense is during the years there's been discussion amongst the community of trying to really get that more active and involved. I think it's booked out in terms of leasable space, but that's a really, I think, good thing. Alluded to earlier tonight, the 2% distribution application opened up for the fall distribution. And just to comment on what Mr. McLean said earlier, you know, they've identified some, the league has identified some field improvements they'd like to make. Some of them were listed in the letter that was forwarded to you. Others, as part of his vision, were not part of the letter, but you heard them verbally tonight. And so the next steps there is to, and we've met before with representatives of the league to try to ascertain their capital improvement needs and they need to get permission when they do certain things at the park that we've facilitated. But we'll continue to meet with him, try to get what I'd like to see is a full program listing of all the things he wants. Some come at different points and becomes a moving target, but let's try to get a full listing, get a solid budget number for each of those with the league and us, prioritize those, and then see what kind of funding recommendations can be made in the FY19 budget that we're going to be talking about here shortly, and then more immediately whether, not whether, but we would be, I'm pretty certain, making a 2% application on behalf of the Little League and the programs that we're talking about here at McDonald Park. The larger issue or question that Trustee Worley has talked about, he's had some conversations with the tribe about this larger exercise, partnering with Mount Pleasant, and I think going to another level of field improvements. I've had different conversations with Mr. Rodriguez and Manager Ridley, but that particular topic has not come up. And Trustee Worley has mentioned it a couple times, maybe a couple months ago, so I was anticipating maybe a call from Eric. So I was kind of waiting for that. I didn't want to get, but maybe I'll, next time I see him, or make a certain particular phone call about that.
I can follow up.
Apparently desire that they have that has just not yet been communicated to me. And then just a brief update on the Lux legal matter. The last time we left it, all the local judges had recused themselves. I believe you were made aware that a new judge had been assigned from a different county, and that judge is now in charge of the case. He has issued a scheduling order that we're in the process of talking with the other party about. Does that work for us, and whether or not we go back, both parties go back to the judge and have the current scheduling order amended. There has been no we submitted what's the term, certain responses that were in our court to respond to. We had to respond to the claim, and we did that. We responded to it. It's public record now. We responded to it in a normal fashion. A lot of the questions are admit or deny, and we do or neither, and so it's kind of paperwork. But to the extent that any of them were, I'll call significant, they were made under the guidance of the strategy that you all approved at our last closed session. We are in the process of putting together the legal defense team, which is the attorney, the township manager, relevant staff of the township, and any outside experts that we may need to help in that defense. So there's the update there. And I'm guessing there'll be some discussion about this in the board comments, but Mr. McDonald was up talking about his water and sewer account. It's an account that contains both water and sewer charges on it. So the dollars that you're hearing about are both water and sewer, not just water. There was a lot of communication between various parties on the matter. Some contained erroneous email addresses, so it became kind of a jumbled, if you will, communication. I have tried to tie it back together. I sent out a communication to Mr. McDonald and to Mrs. McDonald. We were receiving communications from both parties on the subject matter, and sometimes we were responding to the sender and other sender, but not to both of them because we were getting emails from individuals. So that's impacted the process, I think, mostly from a duration point of view more so than any outcomes. The current balance on the bill is a result of usage, and any penalties is a result of non-payment. And when I say usage, it's a result of the application of the ordinance from a how do you bill for the service received perspective, and so we've applied the ordinance like we do for any account. We did have an opportunity during the discussions, the department and the account holder, where, and it was alluded to a few minutes ago about when the water was shut off and what impact did that have. And an individual homeowner can shut off water at their meter inside their house, but that doesn't shut off the water at the source, which is out by the street. And that's what we shut off. And we did attempt to go out there. I don't remember exactly when. I think it was in the middle of winter, to shut it off for non-payment, because we do have active shut-off programs for non-payment. And because of the weather in the winter, or maybe the mechanicals of the lock, we were not able to do that. And so the charges that accrued after that were related to our inability to shut that off is what we credited back to the account. So, you know, we took that into consideration, and that's where the credit came from, along with some penalties and interest that were accrued to the account. So there was a credit that we made to the account of approximately $160,000. The board, and you'll get into this, I'm sure, but these charges are a result of ordinance. They're not the result of policy. It's a lot easier for the board to not follow its policy, make exceptions to policy. I'm not sure it's. I'm not sure the board's able to not follow the ordinance, and I'm not sure the administration is allowed to not follow the ordinance. And but we're not robots, and so what we do is look at each individual situation, and like in this case where we thought if we maybe would have been able to shut off the water, that would have, by us not being able to do that, that created additional charges on the account. So we thought that was, you know, something that we could attribute to our selves, and so that was waived. My last communication was electronically with Mr. McDonald yesterday morning, Mrs. McDonald yesterday afternoon, and I indicated in the communication to Mrs. McDonald that from my perspective the issue was closed, and sometimes we need to close issues. It may not be, you know, the way the outcome an individual would prefer, but from our perspective the issue was closed. Having said that, I have never met personally with Mr. McDonald. I'm happy to do that at any time. But that's where we're at on that issue.
Thank you.
It's where the township is, where the administration is, and where the township managers advice, if you will, or recommendations to the Board of Trustees in terms of where you have room or not to address certain situations. The ordinance does not contain a hardship provision for inability to pay or difficulty to pay. So, you know, I'd look to see if there was one of those. It does not exist. Fundamentally, it's an issue that really resides between the landlord and the tenant. We do not want to, nor do we have any right to get in the middle of that dispute if there is one. What we are willing to do, and what was made clear in one of the communications to, I believe, Ms. McDonald, that to the extent that we could provide them information that they would want or need that help them in their, however they want to pursue the dispute with their tenant, we're happy to provide that. But from that perspective, we don't have any skin in the game, and we don't want any skin in the game. So, and then finally, it's been mentioned a couple times, but Clerk Cody did ask me specifically to thank the election workers that that the Election Commission approved as being able to work the election yesterday. She wanted me to also thank, and I'm personally thanking as well, the township staff that supported the township clerk in the election. I describe it as a very successful election. And so, thank you, and that's all I have.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, so that brings us up to item 13, which is final board comment. Let's start with Norm.
Okay. Just want to follow up again, you know, in terms of that 2%, and I think at this point for Mark to pursue that. And I didn't want to take any further action than what I had already done without the board's both knowledge and advisement as to what you wanted to do regarding this. But listening to Jim McLean, and you know, that was a great wish list. And I think if we can create that list along with, you know, other things that we see as perhaps remedies within improving our ball fields and that, and if we can do this collaboratively with Mount Pleasant, if that's the better way to apply, just hold my calls, Tim. If that would be a better way for us to apply for the 2% with greater success, we might want to look into that. Or perhaps each entity is going to be doing their own because maybe our needs are different in terms of what we want for our facilities. But I really appreciate that the list, and I think the sooner we can get a comprehensive overview as to what would be needed at each of the parks with cost estimates, so that we have an idea of how we might do with the 2% and what would be our cost share, etc. And I'd be glad to follow up and talk further with Eric too regarding Eric Rodriguez regarding this. But I know it was something that they seemed to be really enthusiastic about as well. So whatever we can do, I think, to make this happen, especially I think getting the tournament here, which is a biggie, and again for the kids, it's a memory for life. So you know, and these what we'd be doing is creating ballparks which are going to be improved for many years to come. So I think it'd be a great thing to do. The other thing is that I appreciate everything that Mark indicated regarding what's going on in terms of Mr. McDonald. I take it in terms of the ordinance that it's really out of our jurisdiction as a board to really intervene and to make some decisions or to override or whatever. I would just, you know, encourage that Mr. McDonald go back to maybe meet with Mark. You know, if there's any give in this, you know, there may be some extenuating circumstances, and you know, maybe there's ways to. It may not be the letter of the law, but it's the spirit of the law as to what might work. But certainly, maybe we can even look at penalties and interest that's accrued. so that the bill would stand for what's owed in terms of the bill without the added-on expenditures with the interest and the penalty. That would be something that perhaps could be considered. Again, I don't want to talk out of my jurisdiction on this, but I'm throwing it out as a suggestion for Mr. McDonald and Mark to sit down and talk together. Maybe that's one area where maybe there may be some give and take on the bill, but that's for them to decide. I think we're kind of limited from what I understand in terms of being an ordinance. It's not policy, so. And that's it.
All right. Let's see, let's swing it back around to this end. We'll start with Tim.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to weigh in a little bit on the McDonald water issue that's before us. It does fall under an ordinance, and I'm sure the township has reviewed the ordinance, but, you know, taking a second look, I think, is appropriate. These matters come before this board every now and again, and it really is out of our hands to make the determination. It is an administrative function, but as a utility provider, I think the municipal has to really review the services they're providing and the ordinances in place. I know some municipalities or companies that, say, for instance, provide electricity. And if electricity is shut off, that can create some, you know, life safety issues for their customers, as well as water possibly could as well. And the one thing that kind of stuck out in my mind was the communication, a door hanger. You know, I don't know. To me, that seems, if that is in fact the only communication that's going on as a door hanger, that's maybe a little lax in an area of our ordinance that should be considered for review. And it's not our problem that it may be a homeowner or a property owner and a rental and something going on there, but with something as important as that, it seems like a door hanger has a lot of opportunity for communication not happening. So, you know, I would just suggest that maybe the department use this as a case study review to sound against the ordinance if there's areas of improvement that should possibly be considered for future rewrite of ordinances. And I guess, you know, you have ordinance and letter of the law, but I would like maybe in the consideration of review, you know, have empathy as you look at the program and weigh it against the ethical measures that we've looked at as how we operate. So, you know, that would be my suggestion, that maybe continued discussion between our administrator and the party after, you know, have some discussion and see where the chips may fall, but if nothing else, at least for the township and the department, maybe to look again at the ordinances, and if we are lacking or a little weak in an area, maybe it's communication, to reconsider how we truly do go forward with that.
Thanks, Tim, that was good.
Yeah, good
Thank you,
points, Tim.
Bill.
The comment I would have about the water sewer billing issue that we're discussing at this point is that I'd like to make is for the benefit of the viewer that's going to see this record of the meeting. It should be known that this ordinance that guides all the work that the staff and administration can do, the decisions they can make, also includes notice of minimum sewer use charges per quarter for residential properties, also minimum water service rate per quarter, and sewer service quarter rates per quarter, which some of those minimum quarterly rates are based upon, not based upon usage as much as it's just a flat fee. The way I'm reading
Yes.
this ordinance, it's a flat fee whether you draw a gallon of water or pass a gallon of water. There's still going to be that base fee that we're as an organization are bound by charging due to the ordinance we have, and the reasoning for those minimum charges are to pay for the capital expense. In part, the reason for those charges are to pay for the capital expense of the system that we have, the pipes under the street that go to the wastewater treatment plant, et cetera, et cetera. And finally, then I would add, I encourage you to meet face-to-face in the office with the manager to come to a conclusion on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Good points, too.
Bill?
Friday night, I got done with a job over on the east side of town. We got done about 3 o'clock, so I decided to drive over by Jameson Park just to walk around and, you know, make sure trash was picked up or whatever. I know it does get picked up, but I just wanted to make sure it looked good for the elections, and just wanted to walk around there a little bit and check things out. You know, just a couple things that I noticed. When I got there, little Timmy and Susie got out of a pickup and they raced to the one swing that was out there. Unfortunately, little Susie beat Timmy out there, and they fought over the swing. We have one swing out there, and there's a ball field out there, and a pavilion. I'm sure there's picnics out there. We rent the thing out all the time. I mean, I think we can afford to get a couple more swings out there. There's a gate on the ball field that's missing. I would think that we would want to put a gate up there because we all know that people tend to drive their pickups and cars out on ball fields and do Brodies. I mean, maybe not as much as they did when I was a kid. But not saying that I did.
So you were the one. Finally.
Not saying.
There we go. Tim's nodding his head here, too.
That was the parish hall.
All right. Statute of limitations might be up on that. I'm not sure.
Something else I noticed. There's couple picnic grills on the south side of the park, and I know Mark had mentioned picnic tables before. Well, there's grills there, but there's no picnic tables. So it'd be nice to see a couple picnic tables put up there. There's also a retainage pond out there for, I'm assuming, water runoff from the parking lot. And I don't know, it's a safety issue. I think maybe we should put a fence around that. Because kids run around and play out there. There's a lot of space for kids to play right in that area, and you know, maybe we're opening ourselves up to some kid getting hurt if we don't put something around that. I know it's been like that for years, but it's just a couple things I observed out there. So, thank you.
And to address that, the EDA actually is earmarked funds for Jameson Park, and we're in the midst of looking at a lot of those topics. And I think it's going to be just the start of a year-by-year capital improvement for that park, because it has been neglected for
a long time.
Yeah,
It has
it's the the ugly stepsister.
It's got a nice
of the-
ball field out there
Yeah.
too. You know?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sure the ball field could use some improvements out there too, but.
That is a regulation softball diamond. It could be the premier softball diamond in the area if you wanted it to be, but it is a little run down right now.
Yeah, and that's something that we're looking at. So that's, that's something I think that you maybe could see some decisions made maybe over the course of the winter. Yeah.
I'm good.
She's got the whole.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, I'm being abused right now. I'm good.
I want to kind of piggyback on what Tim said and what Phil said and what Norm said about the situation with Mr. McDonald. I do encourage the discussion, continued discussion between the parties, obviously. I do think that maybe this ordinance, again, could be looked at. Could there be some type of provision put in where there is maybe a little bit of discretion in exception, you know, where we have a situation like Mr. McDonald's where you're kind of blindsided. Communication, you know, we have the property parcel ID, so we know who owns the house. So maybe in the future there could be a letter sent to whoever owns the, right? I mean, that's simple, you know, but to kind of after the fact or in the course of the winter to walk up and find the hang tag and, you know, could the wind have blown the hang tag away and then, you know, so there's a lot of things of what could happen, and I think that, you know, maybe this should be something that we look at to prevent this from happening in the future. Because obviously Mr. McDonald and his family have a long history with the township, and we appreciate that. I'm going to mention bluegrass again. I think that, again, it bothers me every time I pull up to, you know, West Campus Drive and Mission Street, and you've got the beautiful Mount Pleasant, you know, flowers and gateway and manicured, and across the street is knee-high weeds, ill-kept dirt, two-track path up the side of a hill. You know, it's just disappointing because that's our shopping district.
The state owns that.
What's that?
The state owns that. They're cleaning that ditch out.
They
Well,
cleaned
I'm
it.
talking about the fact that there's a lack of a sidewalk, and even they did clean that out, but it's still ill-kept.
And
It's
they,
still
they,
got
they cut
weeds
down
crept
all
through
the,
the
they cut
cracks.
down
Yeah,
all
all
the
the weeds
grass
are-
going all
it's
the
all
way
cut
down,
down.
and
It
they
looks a
just
lot better.
cleaned out, but that's not our jurisdiction.
No, it's the state.
It's a
Right.
state
Right,
property.
right. And that's that. They had let that go way too long, obviously, right? Because I mean, that stuff was 6-8 feet tall in those ditches. But again, Bluegrass Road is our major downtown shopping district, and we don't have lighting. We have intermittent sidewalks. In front of the Hunter's Ale House, there's a sidewalk, and then right where the handicapped walkways are supposed to be is dirt. And I think we continue to wait for somebody to come in there and do it for us. And I think maybe this is a point where if we want to encourage the development out there, then maybe if we looked at maybe doing a project like the EDA did on Pickard Street. I mean, Pickard Street is just absolutely gorgeous, right? From all the way from Somerton Road all the way to the city limits. I mean, flower baskets, and you know, we're looking at the park benches and we're going to repair those. You know, and you've got the nice, you know, seating areas and the sidewalks, and then you look at Bluegrass, and you know, Bluegrass is, you know, people driving their motorized wheelchairs down the middle of the road because there's no sidewalk. There's an excessive amount of accidents that happen in front of Indian Hills Shopping Center. You know, it's so I think at a certain point, you know, when we look at what we're supposed to be accomplishing and the amount of traffic and the amount of revenue that particular area generates for the township and what it could generate, I think it's important for us to maybe think about looking forward and how do we initiate maybe some activity there. Is it a traffic study? Do we, you know, request a traffic study and look at, you know, that Indian Hills Plaza and how can we make that area a little bit safer? All the way down to Encore. You know, Encore Drive is so poorly designed, and I've never seen. You got Menards, Aldi, Sam's Club, Walmart, Kohl's, and you've got enough room in the left turn lane on that road for 4 cars. You know, it befuddles me, and obviously there was maybe some I don't know who developed that, who decided to build the road in that manner, but you know, again, I think that at some point in time, we have to look at that area and decide, you know, is there something that we can do to encourage that is, you know, looks good, and developers want to build there because it's attractive, but also shows some pride in the fact that that's our downtown district right there, right? So I just want to move that forward at some point in time, that we should start maybe that discussion. So,
Ben, if I could,
Yes,
I
sir. Yeah.
have just a minute of rebuttal.
Mm-hmm.
And I say rebuttal because I'm sitting on this board, and I know this board is really committed to progress and making our community better. We have our, you know, our ends that this board determined about safety, community growth, etc. And I really, you know, value your comment about, as a board, to keep that focus on growth and keep that focus on development, but we have to be realistic, Ben. Where sidewalks end on Bluegrass Road, it's because the property owners refuse to give the township the right-of-way to have a sidewalk built there.
Yeah.
That's why there's no sidewalk at the corners. The traffic is a whole different issue when you think about the crazy way drivers operate their vehicles, and, you know, that's a whole different subject that we have no control over. So I'm just sharing these two items with you about where sidewalks end and really whose responsibility is safety on the road. And it certainly doesn't lie with this board in those two particular cases. So I would just ask that you keep some of those aspects of the reality of how government operates and the reality of how society works when you're using your moment of final board comment. Thank you.
My rebuttal on that, just real short, is that it's in our wheelhouse to request a traffic study anywhere. And if we have a high incident of accidents, then we can certainly, I would think, in our wheelhouse, request that the road commission look at that area and see if there are any improvements that could be made.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, any further comments? All right, do you need a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
You want to get out of here?
Yeah.
Well, I think we should just wait a little while.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
have plenty of time. Anything else you need? Ditto.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye, aye, aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
We should have gotten out of here about a half.